If we focus on the early part of the Derrick Lewis fight, you could see Gane playing this kind of the smaller of the two dogs, like he was poking the alpha dog. So if you picture these, and this is a bit of a metaphor for life, there's a Seamus Heaney poem that always reminds me a bit of this, and it's about a young boy following in the footsteps of his father who's working the fields, and then eventually, he's doing the ploughing and his father's following in his footsteps, and it's like the changing of the guard or the passing of the torch. As that happens in life, it also happens in fights. It can happen in a round, or it can happen over 5 rounds. And that's what we saw in that fight. And because Derrick Lewis he's what knockout king, as it says across his chest. He is the stat leader for knockouts, above Ngannou, above Rosenstrike, above all of these guys. So Derrick Lewis is technically the most dangerous heavyweight in the division. And Ciryl Gane's already spent, 10 and a bit minutes working him over. In the first round, you've got Ciryl Gane playing the small dog, who's like poking at the bigger dog, the older dog, nibbling at him, nipping at his foot, poking him and annoying him. And every now and then you'll see Derrick Lewis go, if I get my hands on you in a minute, you're in trouble, and he'll chase after him and go crashing forward and punch air, get frustrated, spend a bunch of energy, and then Gane will be back on his bike and he'll poke and he'll prod and he'll poke. And that shifting of the alpha in the fight was very obvious, but it was not because Derrick Lewis was the dominant fighter and Ciryl came and had to take it off him. It's because Ciryl went, okay, you're the power puncher. I'm going to respect your power punching, and I am not going to play that game with you. I'm going to stay in my safe ranges. So he either stays right on the outside where Derrick Lewis is punching at air, or he stays right inside where Derrick Lewis's arms are wrapping around the sides of his head, and he's not in that range of the punch. Because if you think about the connection of a punch being it's like the Goldilocks zone, it's the right place of a planet away from a star. It's the point where everything's just right. If you imagine that punch is the Goldilocks zone, this side here is way out of range. This side here is right inside a range, and that also leads into takedowns. So there's a safe window either side of those power punches. And in the Derrick Lewis fight, this is what you saw with Ciryl Gane. Poke, poke, stay out of range, poke, poke. And then he starts to chop his legs and slow Derrick Lewis down, in which case he then starts to stay inside and starts to roll those shots off his shoulders. Because he understands those pockets of danger, he's going to be able to play both of these games against Ngannou. Now, there's always the question of whether one of those shots is going to get through, which is why we're so intrigued in this fight. And one thing I think he's very good with Ngannou is his counter-striking. When somebody attacks him, his ability to slip away and counter with those punches. And he has also got more patience. There's no doubt about it. If you go into the first Stipe fight, he came crashing forward. He was in a grapple within the first 10 seconds because he couldn't not go crashing forward. In the second fight, it was a very, very different thing. It made Stipe quite uneasy because he kind of walked himself into range. And when you've got a guy that's carrying a nuclear warhead, you don't want them to have confidence and patience because then they're going to pick their shot and make it count. You want someone with that amount of firepower to be reckless. So at least, like Stipe did in the first fight, he was able to slip and move and roll out of the way of it. So he was able to negate that power. The power's no use if it doesn't land. And that's what Ciryl knows. That's what Stipe knew in the first fight. But in the second fight, he couldn't stop it landing. And that is the question going into this fight, isn't it? It's can Ciryl Gane play that game for 25 minutes or less and not get his head taken off?